Imagine you're living in a neighborhood where one neighbor is constantly building a fence higher, shouting at everyone across the street, and occasionally throwing stones at your windows. You'd think they'd want peace, right? I mean, everyone else on the block has moved on. They're barbecuing, minding their business, trying to live their lives. But this one neighbor? They thrive on the chaos. And here's the weird part. The more pressure you put on them, the louder they get. Now what if I told you that neighbors' entire identity, their whole political existence, was built on being the rebel of the block? That without the conflict, without the enemy, without the drama, they simply cease to matter? That's Iran. And over the past 2 years, this situation has gone from a slow-burning neighborhood dispute to an outright crisis. We had Iran's so-called 12-day war with Israel in June 2025. Then came the massive joint US-Israeli strikes in February 2026 that shook the entire region. These weren't just headlines, they were signals that something fundamental has shifted. So here's the question I want you to sit with for the next 10 minutes. Why would a country already drowning in economic collapse, a currency in free fall, and millions of its own people protesting in the streets, why would that country choose to pick a fight with the world's most powerful military forces? That's not crazy. That's calculated. And today, we're going to break down exactly why. We're going to look at Iran's forward defense strategy, the proxy network that's been their secret weapon for decades. Then we'll unpack the nuclear snapback of 2025 and why it changed everything. We'll look at what's happening inside Iran's borders right now. And finally, we'll walk through the 3 scenarios that could define what comes next. For Iran, for the Middle East, and honestly, for your wallet. Let's get into it. Here's something important to understand about how Iran operates. Iran almost never fights its own wars. Think about it like a chess player who never moves their king to the front of the board. Instead, they send pawns. And those pawns, in Iran's case, are a network of armed groups spread across the Middle East that Iran funds, trains, arms, and directs. What's known as the axis of resistance. The logic is brilliant in a cold, strategic way. If you're Iran, you want to project power and keep your enemies off balance. But you don't want bombs falling on Tehran. So what do? You fight your wars somewhere else. You keep the conflict in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen. You keep the stones, as it were, from ever hitting your own house. The 3 biggest players in this network, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen. Hezbollah has been Iran's crown jewel for decades, a highly trained, well-armed military force disguised as a political party. Hamas gave Iran a foothold right on Israel's doorstep. And the Houthis? They've been firing missiles at Saudi Arabia and disrupting global shipping lanes in the Red Sea, all while Iran keeps a comfortable distance and says, "We don't control them." This strategy worked incredibly well for a long time. Iran could cause chaos across the region, bog down its enemies, and maintain plausible deniability, all without risking a direct strike on its homeland. But here's where the story gets complicated. That shield is breaking. In December 2024, the Assad regime in Syria fell, and that was a massive blow to Iran. Syria was the critical land bridge that connected Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Without it, supplying weapons and fighters becomes dramatically harder. Then, Hezbollah itself was hit hard. Israeli operations significantly degraded Hezbollah's military capabilities, killing key commanders, destroying weapons stockpiles, and eliminating the kind of operational capacity that took Iran decades to build. For the first time in a long time, Iran looked around and realized the buffer zones are shrinking. The proxies are weakened, the shield has cracks in it, and that feeling of being exposed, that is what's driving everything we're seeing right now. Now let's talk about the other ticking clock that was running simultaneously, and this one involves nuclear weapons. Cast your mind back to the 2015 nuclear deal. the JCPOA. As part of that agreement, there was a built-in mechanism called the snapback. Basically, if Iran violated the terms of the deal, international sanctions could be automatically reimposed. And here's the key detail. That snapback mechanism had an expiration date, 2025. After 2025, that tool was gone. The legal window to automatically reimpose those specific UN sanctions would close forever. So 2025 wasn't just another year on the diplomatic calendar. It was a deadline with enormous consequences, and Iran knew it. In May 2025, international inspectors and intelligence reports revealed something alarming. Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium had surged by roughly 50%. They weren't just enriching uranium, they were accelerating. Some analysts described them as being one technical step away from having enough material for 10 nuclear weapons. 10. Now, why does Iran want a nuclear weapon? This is where a lot of people get it wrong. The Iranian regime isn't pursuing a bomb to launch a nuclear strike. That would be suicidal, and they know it. The bomb is what strategists call an insurance policy. Look at North Korea. Nobody invades North Korea. Nobody tries to topple that regime. Because the moment you have a nuclear weapon, you become untouchable. For a regime that's been under constant pressure, sanctions, protests, proxy wars, a nuclear weapon is the ultimate guarantee of survival. It's the one thing that makes regime change essentially impossible. But this calculation triggered a response that nobody could ignore. In June 2025, the US and Israel launched Operation Midnight Hammer, a series of coordinated strikes on Iran's major nuclear facilities. Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan. The facilities that took Iran years and billions of dollars to build were targeted in a single night. This was the spark that ignited what the media started calling the 12-day war. A rapid, intense exchange between Iran and Israel involving missile barrages, drone attacks, and retaliatory strikes that brought the entire region to the edge. The message from the US and Israel was clear: we will not allow a nuclear Iran. But Iran's response made their own message equally clear: we are not backing down. Here's the part that doesn't make the front pages as often, but in many ways it's the most important piece of the puzzle: what's happening inside Iran. If you've seen any economic collapse story, a country where the currency loses its value almost overnight, where ordinary people suddenly can't afford basic groceries, where a lifetime of savings becomes essentially worthless, that is Iran right now. The Iranian rial has been in free fall for years, but by late 2025, it crossed into genuine hyperinflation territory. The combination of crippling sanctions, mismanagement, corruption, and now the economic fallout from military strikes pushed millions of Iranians into a daily struggle just to survive. Bread, medicine, fuel. Things people once took for granted became luxuries, and when that happens, people take to the streets. The nationwide upheaval that erupted in late 2025 was unlike anything Iran had seen since the 1979 revolution itself. This wasn't just young people protesting over a hijab law, as significant as those protests were. This was mothers, factory workers, teachers, merchants, a broad cross-section of Iranian society saying, we cannot live like this anymore. So now, here's the question that geopolitical analysts keep asking. Is the external aggression despite the internal crisis? Or is it because of it? There's a well-established theory in political science, and history backs it up repeatedly, that governments facing internal collapse often manufacture external conflict to survive. It's the oldest trick in the authoritarian playbook. When people are angry about the economy, give them an enemy. Trigger a nationalist wave. Suddenly, it's not, we're angry at our government. It becomes, we must unite against the foreign aggressor. You saw it with Argentina and the Falklands in 1982. You've seen echoes of it in various conflicts throughout history. And many analysts believe this is a key driver of Iran's provocations today. When your people can't afford bread, sometimes the easiest move is to make sure they're too busy worrying about missiles to march on your palace. Alright, so where does this all lead? Let's walk through the 3 most credible scenarios analysts are watching right now. Scenario A, the succession question. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is in his mid-80s, and his health has been a subject of intense speculation for years. A leadership transition in Iran isn't just a political reshuffle. It could fundamentally reshape the country's direction. The next supreme leader could go one of 2 ways. A hardliner, someone even more ideologically rigid, who doubles down on confrontation and the nuclear program. Or, and this is the hope of reformers inside Iran, someone who recognizes that the current path is unsustainable and opens a door to negotiation and eventually relief from sanctions. The succession question may be the single most consequential unknown in Middle Eastern geopolitics right now, because whoever comes next will inherit a country that is militarily battered, economically broken, and socially restless. Scenario B, the total shutdown. In March 2026, Iran made a move that sent shockwaves through global markets: the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a symbolic gesture. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day. Tankers from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, all of it flows through that choke point. When Iran closes that strait, even temporarily, oil prices spike globally. And that means your gas prices go up, heating bills go up, the cost of shipping goods goes up, grocery prices follow. This is Iran's most powerful economic weapon, not a missile, not a proxy army. It's a geographic choke point, and using it is a massive escalation that could draw the United States into a direct naval confrontation. Scenario C, regime change from within. This is the scenario that neither Iran's leadership nor most Western governments talk about openly, but that many Iranians themselves are quietly hoping for. Not regime change imposed by a foreign invasion. History has shown us how badly that tends to go. But regime change driven from within, by the Iranian people themselves, pushed to a breaking point by an unprecedented combination of economic devastation, power shortages, environmental crises like severe water scarcity, and a leadership that seems incapable of course-correcting. The vulnerability the Iranian regime faces today is arguably higher than at any point in its 45-year history. The proxies are weakened, the nuclear program has been set back, the economy is in crisis, and the people are watching. Here's why this matters to you personally, not just if you live in the Middle East, but wherever you are in the world. When Iran's provocations lead to a closed Strait of Hormuz, it's not just a map issue. It's not just a geopolitical headline you scroll past. It's your gas prices. It's your grocery bills. It's the cost of goods shipped across the global economy. We are all connected to this in ways that are easy to forget until they aren't. And the bigger picture is this. Trust is the ultimate currency of the global economy. Trust that oil will flow. Trust that shipping lanes are open. Trust that regional conflicts won't spill over into something larger. Right now, Iran is burning through that trust at an alarming rate. The question isn't whether Iran will face consequences. It already is. The question is, will the regime change its ways before it's too late, or will the system fall like dominoes? That's a question that will be answered not just in Tehran or Washington or Tel Aviv, but in the streets of Iran by ordinary people who have simply had enough. So I want to hear from you. What do you think? Is a nuclear Iran inevitable? Or is the regime closer to collapse than we realize? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you found this video valuable, share it with someone who's trying to make sense of what's happening in the Middle East. And subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. No jargon, no spin, just the facts laid out so they actually make sense. I'll see you in the next one.